can have a chimney in my old Kentucky home. Kentucky.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Kentucky Commons Radio Hour. I'm Michael Moeller. I am not joined by David or John today. Instead, I'm actually in Austin, Texas, specifically at Austin Beerworks, where I am joined by two special individuals. One you've already heard from before, Kindsey Bernhard.
You said my name wrong.
No, I didn't.
Bernhard.
Bernhard.
Whatever.
I heard Mick Bernhard.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kindsey Bernhard. There you go.
Thank you.
Okay.
As a second-time guest, I would like to get my name right.
Well, no, this is your second time guest hosting, so
Okay.
that's even better. And then also Michael Graham, co-founder of Austin Beerworks. I believe you also have a hand in sales and marketing. Michael, is that right?
On my business card, yeah. I don't know how much I actually do, but co-founder for sure. That's indisputable.
Okay, that sounds good. So we're here in the barrel room of Austin Beerworks in Austin, Texas. Really appreciate you. Is there like a train whistle going on right now?
Graham,
or?
you can explain what that is.
I don't know if I can explain it, but we have a sort of a call response system here. If somebody's switching from hot water to cold water or starting to use cleaning chemicals or something, I think it evolved pretty naturally over time, but it's mostly just screams and scary sounds that a normal person wouldn't know what to do with, but it seems to work here between our
And
our brewing
it's a
staff.
fun thing to learn about when you're walking through the production and you're new here and they just scream in you about you get scared.
Yeah.
And you're just like, what is happening? And they're like, oh, we do this when we, and I'm like, and as much as you hear it in the background, as you walk past it and they do it, it still scares you every time. So
It's kind of like walking through a zoo and different animals making different sounds and what is going on around
And then
me?
eventually you just get used to it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
As the zookeeper of the brewery. So Austin Beerworks has been around for a while now, 2011, I believe.
Yeah, we sold our first beer in May of 2011.
So before that, just generally speaking, what were you doing?
Me personally?
Yeah.
So my job prior to Austin Beerworks, I grew up in Austin. I went to college in University of Colorado in Boulder, got a geophysics degree there, came back to Austin with a sort of a plan to get a graduate degree, but long story, that didn't end up happening. And I got really into disc golf while I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. So I got a job at a local disc golf store called Disc Nation here in town and got actually a job with the city Parks and Rec department, helping to sort of rebuild some courses around town. And it was during that time that we started talking about opening up a brewery.
I mean, if you went to school in Boulder, I mean, there were some breweries over there that were already kind of making names for themselves. So was that an influence just right away?
Oh, it was huge. Yeah, I remember I was not a huge beer drinker growing up. I was just used to Lone Star and whatever the cheapest, the cheapest beer was, was probably what was available at a party. And I remember pretty specifically, going to just a house party in Boulder the first year there, and somebody gave me a beer, and it was not pale yellow, it was sort of like a dark copper color. And I was like, what is this? And like, oh, it's a beer called Single Track, and it was just a copper ale. I tried it, and I was like, kind of blew my mind. I was like, wow, I didn't know beer could taste like anything other than than Lone Star. So that opened my eyes, and just then you're kind of surrounded in beer culture in Colorado, and the geology department there actually has an annual beer budget. Well, they have a little bar downstairs, which you don't learn about until you're an upperclassman. But also they would bring beers on we took a lot of like field trips into the mountains and like weekend camping trips to go see certain geology features. But they would always bring like a mini keg or a few growlers of beer, and then we'd drink those at the end of the night. And it's hard not to fall in love with beer doing stuff like that.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
What was the Austin beer scene like in 2011-ish?
Oh, it was much smaller than it is now, for sure. Sort of. I mean, I think this has always been a town that has consumed a lot of beer, but there's just not always been a lot of local beer options. And that was one of the things that made us think that Austin was a great place to actually try to open up a brewery. Besides, growing up here and it just happened to be our hometown. We just lucked out that we looked around like, wow, there's only, I think at the time, like in Travis County, where Austin's located, there were 6 or 7 active brewing licenses when we opened up, and now I think there's over 80. So it's changed a lot in a pretty short amount of time. But to say there was not a ton of local representation when we opened. Thankfully, it helped us out quite a bit.
That's a good, big change. I mean, I feel like even since I was last here pre-COVID, things have changed a lot. Not necessarily just because of closures due to COVID, but just the scene in general and the growth of the city. Somehow it grew even more. I was surprised to see that. Tell me a little bit about the neighborhood that we're in.
So yeah, I mean, this is traditionally when we opened up, it was just an industrial part of town, and that's kind of the way that Austin zoning works. That breweries are required to be in a certain type of industrial zoning, and those have always been on that sort of outskirts of town. But as the city has grown, the outskirts have pushed, further and further away, and now it almost feels like we're kind of central Austin. It's changed a lot. And originally we wanted to be up here because one of the big things we wanted to do from the beginning was self-distribute. So we deliver all of our beer ourselves, and there's some really great access roads here that we can get most places in the city pretty quickly. And also retail taproom was not part of the business plan because it was illegal to have a taproom in Texas when we first opened up. So we didn't care about foot traffic or attracting people to the area. So we just wanted lots of utilities with cheap rent, and that's why we chose this place. But as the city has grown around us, this is actually one of the, I think, probably the best places to actually have a brewery in town now. So we really lucked out that way.
I was hanging out with some people last night, and they referred to this general area as the Brewerhood. Is that something that's common?
I have not heard it referred to it that way, but it makes total sense. And like I said, you kind of see these clusters of breweries around town, and it's because of those traditional zoning areas. And I think that's why there's only a couple of parts of town where breweries are allowed to exist.
That's excellent. So for somebody who doesn't know what Austin Beerworks is, or maybe even hasn't been to experience Austin beer, just what is your all shtick? What are you known for? What is this facility like?
Thinking back to the beginning, and we went through all these kind of branding exercises, which was actually really, really helpful and important to figure out who we wanted to be and who we thought we were and who we wanted to grow into. And these two words kept popping up, and we kind of built a brand identity and really kind of a brewing philosophy around it. And it was bold and clean, like those two words. So we tried to distill it down. So we've always liked really big flavors, and we've liked big hoppy beers, but also we've always, been really big on clean lager beer too. And a lot of it you can say, goes back to the climate of Texas and it being hot all the time. But we like, I don't know. So big flavors that finish crisp and clean. And I would say that if I could choose what other people thought about us, or at least thought about our beers, it would be that. But then as a personality of a brewery, gosh, I think that was never intentional. I think we just sort of, we're just a bunch of silly people that have attracted other silly people and silly customers too, and have just sort of run with it. And it was never an intent, an intention to be like, we're going to be the silly, wacky brewery. But it just sort of, I think if you ask a lot of outside perception of what we are, I think it's just a bunch of goofballs running around screaming, making zoo noises, and and beer comes out the other end.
Yeah, I'll definitely echo that statement as only being here, 5 months. I think it was by week 2. The office and most of the people here knew everything about me because they make you feel comfortable. You don't have to hide who you are. And there are definitely some stories of me being weird and unique, and
she fit right in.
Yeah. So it definitely has that culture of like, no need to pretend to be someone you're not. Come in here. If you don't own Salt and Pepper Shakers as a 27-year-old female, they're going to give you crap for it, but it's out of love. And that might be me.
Is that just like a question during the interview process? Hey, okay, your credentials are very good. Also, what kind of Salt and Pepper Shakers do you have?
Well, we have joked that question's being added because everyone was incredibly surprised that I did not own Salt and Pepper Shakers at my apartment.
it's just fascinating, really. But,
Yeah, I guess. It's,
I have since purchased salt and pepper shakers.
but they're just empty. They're like nothing's inside of them. They're just there for
they
show.
still have the wrap on them. I haven't taken the plastic seal off.
So yeah, Kindsey. So for the folks that have actually, go back and listen to these old episodes before, you were obviously living in Kentucky at the time, and that's how we know each other. And you've since moved on to work at this brewery. So obviously, like something caught your attention with this opportunity in this brewery. Without you're gonna end up giving kind of like a somewhat of a kiss-ass answer, but like
cliche,
what?
yes.
Yeah, like what was that initial draw for you with that first impression?
It's a brewery that's been around for 12 years. And just having that, experience of like knowing how this industry works in Austin, was intriguing to me. I actually visited here before I got the job or started interviewing for it. Thought, the taproom was a really cool space. I don't want to use the word old, but we're 10 plus years. And I would say most of the breweries nowadays are 5+ years, hitting that boom, back in 2015 as the lights go out. And for your Patreon watchers, it has a different feel to the taproom. It's really homey. I feel like I go to a lot of breweries now and it just feels very like straight out of a magazine or a hotel lobby because they're trying to, make everything look pretty and clean. But when I walked in here, it just felt homey. It felt, I don't want to say lived in because that sounds bad, but it had a different feel to it than some of the other, breweries that have been around. The staff is incredible and the bartenders and, those are my employees now. And it was I could just see myself not only living here in Austin, but working for this brewery. And it was awesome to, get this job and live here now. And I feels like I've been here for like 3 years and it's only been 5 months.
You've crammed 3 years worth of work into 5 months for sure. But it's funny. I don't know. It's funny we still don't, it's like myself, I guess. I don't think of myself as an old person until I see a picture of myself or whatever. Like, oh, I'm not 20 anymore or whatever. It feels the same way with the brewery. We don't feel like an established brewery. And we in a lot of ways, we still feel like a startup, which is, I know, not true. So it's always interesting to hear that other perspective. And I know it's true, but yeah, we kind of are old now, which is cool. But it just reminded me of like when we opened, we started off on the building next door to us and then expanded into this side. And one of the big concerns was it's going to feel too clean and too new and too shiny. And people are used to this old side because it's not lived in. And I'm glad to hear it. Yeah. So now it's dirty enough to actually feel.
I always
like
say, if I don't see a cobweb up in a corner somewhere, I don't trust this brewery.
Sure.
Granted, I clean all the cobwebs here, but sometimes they just look too new and too clean. And it I don't know. It just doesn't feel
aesthetics
homey.
over beer sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah, I get that. This is something I kind of like to talk about briefly with some folks, but COVID changed a lot for so many breweries across the nation. And laws change constantly just depending on the city or neighborhood that you were living in. What was your all's pivot during COVID? And did any of those pivots, are they still around right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the biggest one, and we got so fortunate with timing of everything, but Texas was the last state in the country to allow beer to go sales from breweries. So basically, to allow customers to come and buy a 6-pack or a 4-pack or whatever and bring it home with them. We were the only state where that wasn't allowed, and we, after 12, 14 years of lobbying, our legislature, we finally got that done in when did it become? So 2018. So right before COVID hit. I think it was September of 2018, and then 19. Yeah, and then COVID shut everything down. So, but what it allowed us to do, thankfully, was we were, the law changed. We knew it was changing, so we sort of built the infrastructure. We got the coolers ready and everything else to be able to offer beer to go. And then COVID comes and shuts down our tap room. So guests can't come and have a beer here anymore. The tap room, it's sort of the heart and soul of the brewery. It's a relatively small piece of the overall volume we do, but it's huge for, it's a lot more profitable to sell somebody a beer straight to them than it is to have to distribute to a bar. And also just from the customer brewery kind of relationship building, everything. It's huge. It's a huge part of having that direct connection with somebody. But that was the big pivot of we switched, our taproom stuff from people can't come to the taproom. Well, all right, well, we can sell them beer to go. And we made an effort to have a new beer released every week. And partly for our team, just because we wanted just to keep people engaged and have new ideas and have new exciting things to be doing all the time. Even though overall volumes were way down, we could still do fun experimental stuff. And same thing for the customers. We wanted to give them a reason to, can't say enough about how much the community came to support us during that time. They made an effort to come out and buy our stuff, which was that's why we're still here. But we wanted to give them a reason to keep coming back. So that was a big thing. Just like, let's just keep getting these new beers. We design new labels every week. And it was just that was it. Like that was like 90% of my day to day of that time was trying to keep these new, pipelines of new beers coming out and keep people engaged. And, and we're still here. It was awesome.
And I just want to, Graham, you mentioned it, but Texas didn't allow beer to go until 2018. And so moving here from Kentucky to Texas and learning that, it was kind of crazy that breweries up until 2019 could not sell their beer to go. So that's one thing I, like to, talk about, especially for audiences outside the state of Texas, just imagine breweries back in Kentucky pre-2018 and you couldn't get their beer to go. And obviously that was huge for Texas breweries during the pandemic, saved most of them. And I'd be crazy to think if that didn't get passed during that session, what would have happened to breweries during the pandemic?
So what's the next law that you're trying to, what's the next change for Texas breweries that's going to be for the better?
Oh gosh, I feel like there's probably a long list of things that we would like, but that was actually one of the sort of concessions that we made on the beer to go thing. Is like it had just been such a contentious battle, and I think the legislators were tired of hearing from us, and the distributors and the other, and the retailers and everybody's just tired of talking about beer and trying to pass big sweeping changes. We all just agreed, let's work together. We'll pass this thing, and then let's chill out for 12 years. No more. Let's not do any other big changes. So, and honestly, we're fairly happy with that. There's a few small, small tweaks that will help efficiencies and help every tier, but that's really kind of just minutia. Big picture stuff, I think we're actually decently happy with where things are right now.
Shameless plug. If you want to hear and answer this, listen to the Boys Are From Marzen podcast with Caroline Wallace, the executive director of the Texas Craft Brewers Guild.
Oh man. Well, yeah, she can be way less diplomatic.
I did ask her that same question, but
it's a good one.
I also want to mention one of the things with the beer to go, a person is only allowed to buy one case of beer to go. So if someone walks in and want 2 cases of our Pearl Snap, we have to sadly say no, or it's only 288
fluid ounces per person per day. Yeah.
Is there a method for tracking that? Like, what stops me from just like walking in when you all open, grabbing a case, and then like 8 hours later grabbing one again?
That's the interesting thing. It's not really a 24-hour time period. I think it's calendar day, so you could come in at 10 p.m. and then 10 a.m. Well, that's whatever. Doesn't really matter.
No, I mean,
yes,
in the same day, though.
Our POS software can track driver's licenses and credit cards, and we'll send up a red flag if somebody exceeds that limit.
And the nice thing is most people know about that.
Sure.
Or, we have to call them, text them, hey, you can only pick up 1 case of Sun Sevel, but you can go to HEB down the street and get as much as you like. Yep.
And then we'll see you tomorrow. Because you're going to need that extra. You're going to need that second case by then. It's Thursday, and you're going to want that for Sunday. So there are a couple beers in front of us as we talk about beers to go. Let's share one if you'd like.
Sure.
What is it?
The beer we have, it's one that we just it's actually one of the beers that we made during the lockdowns. It's called Concise, and it's basically it says pale lager on the can. You could call it a German style Pilsner. I would say it has German, all German ingredients and German brewing techniques. Really, if I had to sum it up, it's just a really delicious lager beer.
I love the can. We were talking about it a little bit before we started recording, but the can is basically just like a brewer's recipe. You have the grain bill, you have the amount, you have the percentage of like, okay, this is the Mayflower pills that we have in this. And then you look down and you talk about the, just reading this label as I talk, but mash profile, fermented at 50 degrees, conditioned at 60 degrees, chilled 32, mash out at 170. Like, this is a very detailed brewer's recipe right here on the can.
That's literally like basically the template for our recipe sheets, and it says exactly how we made the beer, what's in it. And yeah, if you wanted to make this yourself, you could take this label and scale it to whatever size you wanted and try to make the same thing. That's not, that's something, I guess it's kind of cliche too, but how open the industry is and how open it is to sharing recipes and ingredients and everything else. And also, we talk about that a lot too, of if you give somebody the exact recipe to your most popular beer, are they going to have the same sales as that beer has? Almost guaranteed not. Like, there's so much weird magic that goes into a successful brand for whatever reason. And you could take one beer and call it something else, and it might tank, or it might go from a dud to an all-star, and you never know like what resonates with the customer and what name fits and how you approach the branding and everything else. So this was but we get those emails, I say on a weekly or monthly basis of home brewers saying, hey, this is my favorite beer. Will you give me some tips of how to brew it? So we wanted to kind of create this, convention with this label of, hey, let's just start actually putting our recipes on the beer itself. And if somebody really likes it, then they can go and recreate it themselves or tweak what they think could be better about it and make it on their own. But it's just kind of another way to interact with customers.
Yeah, that's great.
And and for beer like this, there's not much to it really. It's a simple beer, simple ingredient, simple recipe. It just that's what I really, really like about this beer in particular, and beers like it. It's sort of a showcase of, if you buy really nice, high quality ingredients and then treat them in a very, very slow, sort of dedicated way, a great thing's going to come out on the other end. So there's not much to say about the beer other than I think it's just a fantastic beer.
As we're drinking this, can you share a little bit about the actual brew house, like kind of the setup that you all have, and how many barrels kind of system you're working on?
Sure. I mean, we're super fortunate to have two systems, and both really kind of oversized for what they typically need to be. But our main production system, it's a 60 barrel 3-vessel brew house that we actually bought from Odell Brewing Company. When we were expanding and we knew we were growing into a new space, we were that was one of the big budget items. We're going to buy this brand new German brew house, super top of the line, very, very fancy, very, very expensive. We were super excited about it, but we're like, gosh, this is going to take up the whole budget for this thing, and we're going to have to, basically make people sit on pallets in our tap room and whatever. There's no room for anything else. And then I think it was during a GABF trip, we went up there and went to visit our friends at Odell, which we do every year. And we were talking to them about our plans for the year, and they're like, well, actually, we have we're upgrading our system too, and we're going to be putting this one on the market pretty soon. And if you're interested, make an offer. And we did, and they accepted it. And we're like, well, we just saved. We can build a tap room now, So and not to say that it's not a super fancy system. It has made a lot of award-winning beer. And we, coming from Odell, we knew that's actually something we said to ourselves, set a standard. Like, if we're not making good beer on this thing, this is our fault. Like, we know this thing makes fantastic beer. So it's a beautiful, classic American stainless steel. It's going to last forever. I hope it goes to 5 different breweries after us. Like, it'll last forever if you take care of it. But we also have a 20 barrel pilot system, which is huge for a pilot system for most places.
That's more than
it's bigger than I'd say that's bigger than probably 75% of breweries' main systems.
I see a pilot system. I'm just like, oh, we got a 3 to 5 barrel system. Like,
and that totally fell into our lap. We had been operating on about as basic of a 7 barrel system as you can possibly imagine. That was not keeping up with the taproom demand. So we knew we wanted to upgrade it. Like, we were looking at a say 12 to 15 barrel, but this thing just sort of fell into our lap, and it was a offer that was too good. It was a brew pub that sort of broke up because the partnership dissolved, and there was a lot of bad blood. It was sort of like a messy divorce type deal. And we just it was something that we were looking for, that we had the money ready to go right on the time that we needed it. And we flew out to Colorado. Funny that I actually think about that. Both of our brew houses came from Colorado. Looked at it that day. It's like, yes, this is fantastic. It's exactly as advertised. And we bought it that day. And it's been a fantastic, like I said, it probably kept us afloat during the COVID lockdowns.
Kindsey, can you speak a little bit about your experience from going? I mean, you worked at a pretty large brewery organization before coming here, but you worked out of a tap room that didn't necessarily have the brewing equipment in it.
Right.
So what is it like working for a couple smaller breweries or a tap room brewery without the equipment to this huge operation here?
Well, first of all, it's amazing. I love being around production. And I think that's, maybe one of the reasons, maybe it is one of the reasons why, this made sense for me to make this jump here. Being around production, it's very different. So at Highwire, you're a satellite tap room. All you're doing is ordering. You're submitting orders for kegs that are available through distribution. Being a manager with production is you're in constant contact with the head brewer. Not constant, but continually talking. Whether it's what beers are ready to go or kegged and need to be put on. Working with, talking to him about beers that didn't move, and, maybe we shouldn't brew that again, or beers like that. Showing him numbers of, IPAs are still killing it. IPAs are not dead. And you can see numbers through that. And, it's unfortunately, not unfortunately, but, it's still something that people love to drink. And, you always get tired of brewing IPAs, but our top selling beers most weekends are IPAs. Not right now, actually. Our Monocore Oktoberfest is crushing it. But, just being around production and, working with them on a daily basis of, beers that are being brewed, and, also like our beers being returned, and having that conversation with them, like, hey, this beer is not selling well. It's being returned. Let's have everyone taste it. Should we pull it? So those conversations are happening weekly, which is just incredibly different than working at a satellite tap room where you are not working day to day with a production team. And I love it. I love working with the brewers. Obviously customer feedback is very different than like a brewer or somebody on the Austin Beerworks team, but it's, you kind of have to have those tough conversations with them. Like, hey, I know this is your baby and you loved this beer and this was your idea, but I think we've got to pull it. It's, and it's different, and it sucks to have those conversations with people to kind of, and not ruin their day, or, be like, hey, but it's part of the job, and, can't have a beer sitting there for many months.
Yeah. I'm one to complain a lot online about breweries, there being more than just the IPA. Obviously, I understand that what sells is ultimately, as a business, is what you want to have. People complain a lot on social media, particularly on Twitter. Before I even knew what Austin Beerworks was, I followed you, Graham, on Twitter.
I'm sorry.
I think we all did.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
It was just like you were like one of the beer guys to follow. And then later on, I was just like, okay, Austin Beerworks. And then I started making the connection. ABW, oh, that's what that means, duh. So why, you do seem pretty comfortable on Twitter, and you also, I believe, run the brewery's Twitter as well, correct?
Yeah. I get to do all that fun stuff.
So why specifically Twitter? What speaks to you about that platform?
Me personally, I feel like that is the... I mean, maybe it's for my personality, but I feel like it's just the best place to actually have a conversation. And it's where I have the best conversations. And I feel like actually the most productive conversations. And I feel like it's where people actually engage the most. What I especially like about it, like as a side hobby or thing I'm really interested in, is astronomy. And I've actually sent just replied to one of the world's, foremost astronomers about something. I was like, wow, that's super cool. And then he'll like my tweet and reply. And it's like, it's one of the, I feel like you don't get that type of interaction and conversation on other platforms as you do. So that's what appeals to me. It's basically allows you to be like whatever you're nerdy about, direct access to the best in that, whatever that niche thing is. So that's what I love about it. And I feel like it's more constructive too. I feel like I can actually have a sort of a conversation on there versus, Facebook or Instagram, where it's just sort of, there's this one singular post that becomes its own ecosystem that can just really get toxic super quickly. Versus and not to say that Twitter doesn't have its own type of toxic content, but I feel like it's easier to ignore, and I don't know, it's more community oriented. But for whatever reason, I feel like my people are on Twitter, and I just feel more comfortable there.
Beer Twitter's huge.
Yeah.
Well, it is. I mean, Kindsey, that's also, I think, our first conversation happened on Twitter as well. So you build this community of your niche, whether it be beer, whether it be astronomy. And you do get to reach out and talk to folks, but you also get to talk to the brands. So one thing that I'm noticing, though, is that a lot of businesses and a lot of breweries have let their Twitter account go by the wayside. Like sometimes you go to a Twitter page for a brewery and you see like, oh, they haven't tweeted since 2019. Mm-hmm. And that's not just breweries, but like that's a lot of different businesses don't take advantage of that space. Do you have any thoughts on that from the business side?
Yeah, I mean, I guess really you're always sort of chasing where you get the most interactions, the most impressions, and really, I guess the point of all of that stuff is to translate into money, right? Mm-hmm. You want to whatever you're doing, you want it to come back into sales, and that doesn't have to be a direct thing. Like say, all right, if I post this, it's going to result in this number of dollars spent. But I think it's sort of building up a personality and a relationship with your customers or creating new customers through the content. But I think Twitter, I guess that's sort of the answer is I think everybody's sort of chasing where they think people are looking at stuff and interacting with things and spending more spending more time on the platforms where they're getting more interactions. And Twitter, for better or worse, I mean, it seems like it's really hard to build an audience from scratch nowadays. Mm-hmm. And that you're probably, if you're a brewery starting today, you're probably better off spending your time and energy and thought on TikTok and YouTube videos and this type of content, because I think otherwise it's already kind of too late for some of these platforms.
Yeah, I mean, not only are you posting, but you also are engaging and monitoring and checking reviews and whatnot. So it does take up a lot of time. You're not just saying it out there and posting it and forgetting it. Yeah. I will say just a little plea for businesses is, or rather maybe some insider knowledge, is if you want to get in front of media, that is where media hang out, whether it is your specific niche or your hometown news journalists. Like that's where they're hanging out. That's where they're seeing things first. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, from a PR angle, that's what I'm thinking of when I'm thinking about breweries not being on Twitter specifically, but I understand that it takes time and effort too.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. Like it's kind of what I was alluding to earlier, that the nerds of whatever thing, like the people that are really into whatever, I think they have their own Twitter community, and the beer has its own. But like you said, journalists, local journalists, they have their own too, and it's a really easy way to actually connect to the people that you want to connect with for whatever reason. You just have to know who to look towards. And I think, and that's a smart way of approaching it. I think most people just want the maximum views or the maximum likes or the whatever, but that doesn't necessarily translate into finding the right people that you're actually trying to find with the information that you want to put out.
Well said. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. One quick question though. When I say Louisville, Kentucky, what comes to mind?
Well, Kindsey. Now, yeah, she's been. Kentucky's always been. I've never been to Kentucky, and it's always been one of those fascinating states for me. And funny that just recently, and talk about Twitter content, just something if I'm bored or whatever, I made a map of my understanding of the United States, breaking the country into regions of the Midwest and the Plains, and
I saw that,
Texas
actually.
is its own thing. I got more comments on Kentucky, which I think I included in the South but it's not. I know it's not, but it's very much its own thing. I made Texas its own thing. I think Kentucky seems like its own thing too. It's this weird cross section of cultures that you drive across the state and you'll think you're in 3 different regions. And I think that those are always my favorite areas of these weird cross section cultures where there's all these different kinds of things going on. Plus I'm as a geology major, there's really interesting Appalachia geology going through there, and the music's great. Gosh, I don't know. I'm very interested in Kentucky, but when you say Louisville, I know that I think of Louisville, which I know is not the way you're supposed to say it.
Yeah.
I think about, all right, I've got to say Louisville.
I've trained them. Don't worry.
Yeah. So yeah, that when I hear just anything Kentucky, I'm actually just kind of like my interest is piqued because it's just a fascinating place for me.
It is. There's a lot of different things going on. Just as an aside, and this is a question I don't know the answer to, but how many counties are in Texas?
Actually, that's a great question that I don't know the answer to too. If I had to, somebody was pressing me to guess how many counties are in Texas, I would maybe say 200.
Okay. Kindsey's looking it up for us right now.
Yeah, how many?
Because this is something I'm very curious about.
But it's funny that, I'm sure you ask a lot of people this question, they think of bourbon, horse racing. So it's kind of refreshing to have people not think of just those 2 things.
Yeah.
Because, as Michael knows, when you work in the industry in Kentucky, tourism is huge there, but for bourbon. And so you get a lot of people who come to do the bourbon trail or visit distilleries, and you can't drink bourbon all day. So it's cool to hear people not think of the state as just bourbon.
Yeah, I mean, as a whole, we've more than tripled the amount of breweries in Kentucky over the last 8 years. That stat has changed slightly as time goes on. To answer my own question, over 250 counties in Texas. Texas is pretty big, right? Kentucky has 120.
All right.
So that's just saying, and with that, you see a lot of changes in diversity and culture specifically, from Eastern Kentucky to Western Kentucky, completely different places. Southern Kentucky, Northern Kentucky, more Cincinnati, Ohio. Louisville's going to be its own thing too. So you're right. It is a cross section that's unlike any other. Very, very much. Some is more Midwest. Some is Southern culture.
Yeah.
It's fun. The other thing I like to bring up about Kentucky, though, is that do you know the Kentucky Common?
The style?
The style.
They know.
Kindsey's a strong advocate. And it's a style that we've, I think like any brewery, you see the kind of the cool thing of the day or whatever. I remember when Kentucky Common became like, now it's a category, and now it's a but we've never made one that is being lobbied for heavily.
I have been pressuring our brewer to make one. It's happening.
Just put it on that small.
We have a
name.
System. It's coming. Don't worry.
All right. Is it the Kindsey Common or something?
No, that's a great name. But
Kindsey?
when we brew it again after that, we'll name it that.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that's coming. That's I've asked that question a few times now on the podcast, and this is the first time anybody's actually said yes. We're doing it.
And that's because of me. But they had heard. Some of you had heard of it before.
We've heard of it, and it seems like anything. I mean, on paper, I don't think you get probably the full experience talking to somebody that's had one and is very passionate about it and say, this is actually a great thing. There's something behind it. That's what's kind of inspiring to do one.
So yeah, I've told them when I go home for the holidays, I will bring some back for them to try.
Love that. Well, you will be happy to know that I actually have some that you can share with your folks here that I just haven't given you yet.
Oh, well, okay. Even better.
I just don't have it with me today because I'm an idiot and forgot it. So on that note, Graham, Kindsey, thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it. I know it takes some time out of your day on a Monday, so it's very nice.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. And do you know are the majority of your listeners in Kentucky?
No, it's actually all spread out. I want to say, long story short, this used to be another podcast that I had, then I just kind of rebranded it when my friends and myself did this one. So that was all over the place. California, Oregon, Kentucky, I'm listing them in order. Ohio, Indiana, West Virginia.
Where people drink beer. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, hello to everybody, and thanks for listening if you made it this far. My pleasure to be here.